South Africa have hammered Argentina 48-7 to win the Rugby Championship for the first time since 2019 and the first full edition of this competition since it was the Tri-Nations back in 2009. In this video, you are going to get a front row seat as to how we pulled off this famous win in Nelspruit over Los Pumas, and the only thing to do now is to get started. And the most obvious place is with Etzebeth, a giant of a man, a giant of a Springbok. He is now the most capped South African international rugby player of all time. 128 is the magic number for Eben. And you may have noticed when the national anthems were playing, Eben had some watery eyes, and he was even unable to sing the national anthem. And that just sums it all up, in my opinion. What a great man this has been for Springbok rugby, a real colossus. Now, we saw a fast start by South Africa at the Mandela Stadium. Mandela, a man who much was said about in the week. Well, he was at his creative best, a beautiful cross kick, which unfortunately was just a little bit too long for Cheslin Kolbe, but I think you could already see what the intention was. Also, as early as the 3rd minute, speaking of intentions, it looked like we were going to try and scrum as many times as we possibly could because we murdered the Pumas in that opening scrum of the match. It didn't look good for them in Santiago del Estero last week. It certainly wasn't looking good to start with on this occasion. And speaking of creativity and innovation, there was something really fun that we saw at the line-out early on. It was Bongi Mbonambi throwing to Etzebeth, who was the front jumper, and what he did is he flipped the ball behind him, something that you might see in American football or basketball, and Pieter-Steph du Toit was the second jumper, so both of them going up at the same time, obviously with support men, and I just thought, I don't think we've ever seen something like that before. Very, very cool to see that sort of thing from South Africa. But it's all nice and well that there are nice moves on display, but we want to see points. And we wouldn't have to wait too long for the first points of the match. Sure enough, from a scrum, we gained advantage. The ball made its way into the back line. Manie Lebok putting Apelele Fassi through the gap for the opening try of the match. And then very interestingly, not Lebok, but instead Jaden Hendrikse took the conversion. Successfully too, I might add, and it was 7-0 in Nelspruit. The score was doubled about 6 minutes later, again from a line-out. We would play the phases, we would get very close to the line, and then Pieter-Steph du Toit, who is a giant of a Springbok himself, picked up the ball and leapt over the ruck to go over for South Africa. Hendrikse with the conversion, and it was 14-0. A beautiful way to start the test match for the Springboks. But I had one concern at that stage, and even though we had made several personnel changes, as it turns out, this was very similar to what we saw last week in Santiago del Estero. A fast, positive start by South Africa, racing into an early lead, 17-0 it was on that occasion, but we were also leading 14-0 at one stage, and then Argentina came back, and wouldn't you just know it, that's exactly what happened here. They were playing games with their line-out all night long, taking several short line-outs, even one or two occasions going right to the back. And on this occasion, it was a short line-out from the visitors. The ball moving down the line, creating space, and Thomas Albornoz, the man of the match last week, but largely anonymous on this occasion, except for this one try that he himself would go and score and then convert as well. So, man of the match last week, scored all 7 points for Argentina this week. Maybe it's a little harsh to say that he was anonymous, but to be fair, most of the Argentine players did not have great games. But you could also say that they weren't allowed to have great games either, especially when you factor in the way that their scrum was being dominated. Santiago Grondona would give away a penalty. Jaden Hendrikse would slot it over. 17-7 the score, and as it turned out, that would also be the last successful kick for Hendrikse, who would hit the post and send 2 more wide, but it didn't really matter on this occasion. But just thought I'd throw that in for the sake of historical accuracy and statistics. Not having a go at all at Jaden, he actually had a great game overall, let it be known. Now in the 26th minute, the Boks looked dangerous again. This time they were on the right-hand side and coming back down the left-hand side, and it looked like something might be about to happen when the referee blew the whistle to stop play. And the reason that play was stopped is because Santiago Chocobares was lying on the ground receiving medical attention. And at this point of this video, I just want to pause there because this is something that we do see in rugby. You don't really see it in other sports. And again, maybe, as you guys will know by now in each video, I tend to pick on our sport here and find an area where I think we can improve. And this is one of those. And I accept that what actually happened in the match itself on this occasion was that in play, I think it was Apelele Fassi actually crashed into Chocobares' knee, creating a very, very awkward situation for Chocobares. He went down and play continued. And again, the ball came back down, as it turns out, in his general direction. Now, I think that what we should do in rugby is when something like that happens, when it's very clear and obvious that a man is out and cannot participate in play, we should just blow the whistle, get him off the field, make a replacement if necessary, and then continue play. I think that it's very unfair on one hand because with him lying there, Argentina were effectively down to 14 men. And this is not because of a yellow card. This is because of an injury. And I don't think that that's what we want to be seeing in rugby. The other thing is it creates a dangerous scenario because he's lying there. Imagine if Ben O'Keefe, the referee, had not blown the whistle, let's say, in time. And perhaps you then run the risk of players running on top of Chocobares, landing on Chocobares. There's all sorts of horrible things that could happen in that scenario. And I just think that this is one area that is an easy fix for rugby. If a man goes down and it's clear that he is unable to continue, blow the whistle, stop play, get him off, get someone else on as a replacement, and then continue, maybe with a free kick or whatever the case may be. That might be the appropriate way to start play. And I know that maybe an opposition player might then fake an injury, but rugby's not really that game, unless you're Nick White, of course. But the less said about Nick White, the better, especially on this channel. Now, speaking of yellow cards and foul play, well, 3 minutes later, Apelele Fassi was the victim of a Mateo Carreras collision in the air. Carreras taking Fassi out, and there was little option for O'Keefe but to send him to the sin bin. As it turns out, that was the first yellow card shown to an Argentine player in this year's Rugby Championship. They've had an impeccable disciplinary record, and I wouldn't say that their discipline cost them in this match because they were already losing by a fair score, but obviously that didn't help with Carreras going off the field, and sure enough, it didn't take very long before we would go and score our next try. Fassi, as it turns out, was the man who would score that try. Some quick hands, space created, Fassi going over 22-7 to South Africa as halftime approached, but there was still time for another try for our rugby world champions. The ball would again go down the line, down the right-hand side this time, reaching Cheslin Colby, who had about 3 defenders to beat, and for Cheslin Colby, that's really not a problem. He stepped inside beautifully a la Rugby World Cup Final 2019 against England and helped himself to another try, and it was 27-7 at halftime. South Africa virtually out of sight, dominating in the scrums. I mean, Argentina just couldn't get out of the scrums quickly enough. It was brutal. It really was brutal. It didn't look like 2 tier 1 nations scrumming against one another. It was something out of this world, how dominant we were. And that's going to be something that Felipe Contepomi is going to have to fix if Argentina are going to be competitive at the Rugby World Cup in 2027. They've been wonderful this year. They've beaten South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand in the Rugby Championship. It's never happened that they've beaten all 3 in the same competition, but in order to build on the foundations and to keep the momentum going, they are going to have to sort out their scrummaging problems. In the line-out, South Africa were looking good and looking competent. And then again, overall, in the back line, creative. The forwards were playing their role on that front as well. Lots of innovation. Mani Lebok was having a great game. Pieter-Steph du Toit was having an outstanding match. Apelele Fassi was looking good. Truth be told, if you had asked me at halftime who my man of the match was, I would have said maybe all 15 of the Springboks. It was that good. Now, just before we come to the second half assessment, I want to tell you guys about the super thanks button. If you look down there somewhere, you will see a heart with a $sign inside of it. If you click on that, you can make a highlighted comment on this video. And I promise that if you do that, I will click the heart button on your comment and you will get a guaranteed reply from me. On top of that, it will ask you to make a donation. Now, that can be whatever you want it to be. I think it tends to ask for donations in dollars. So $1, $10, $100. Hey, if you want to give me $1 million, I'm not going to say no. Why do I want you to do this for me? I want to go to the Rugby World Cup in 2027 and provide you with daily content on this channel. I'm going to need a little bit of funding to make that happen, and you can help me by making use of that super thanks button. I very much would appreciate it, and I'm thanking you from the bottom of my heart in advance. Now let's talk a little bit about that second half. We saw some more cross kicks from Manie Libbok. That had become a feature of the match. And again, his hands were good, his passing was good. Manie was having a very, very good match. And I think it had a lot to do with him having the burden of goal kicking lifted from him. Give it to Jaden, give it to Andre Pollard, who would come onto the field a little bit later. Give it to Sasha Feinberg and Ngomezulu in the future. And this is what Manie's supporters have been saying all along. He is the most creative and innovative 10 that South Africa has. Siya Kolisi, in his pre-match press conference, noted that Manie is the most important player in the team and he pulls all the strings. Now, those who have felt differently about Manie Libbok probably have their jaws drop when they hear and see such statements. I've said before that I believe that if Manie Libbok is to be in the Springbok team, then somebody else needs to be the goal kicker, and that somebody else, whoever it is, has to be a reliable goal kicker. If there isn't anybody around, then Pollard or Feinberg and Ngomezulu need to play at fly half, and they do the kicking, and then there isn't a place in the team for Manie Libbok. I've even gone so far as to suggest that maybe Manie should strongly consider moving to fullback, because there he would have even more space to create all kinds of chaos from an attacking perspective. But perhaps that's another discussion for another day. Let's get back to what was going on in Nelspruit. It certainly did get a little bit scrappy in that second half, and we mentioned earlier the Mateo Carreras yellow card. Well, at one point in this second half, Argentina were down to 13 men. It started when Pablo Matera took Vincent Koch out, and I don't really want to talk about this too much because Matera is my favorite Puma, but we have to discuss it, don't we? Vincent Koch didn't have the ball, so that was the first problem with Matera tackling him. But if you have a look at the technique, the way Matera hit Koch, his shoulder made contact with the back of Koch's head. And whenever that happens in rugby these days, that is going to be a yellow card, and you run the risk of it becoming a red. And as it turned out, that's exactly what happened in the case of Pablo Matera. But luckily, maybe for him, it was only a 20-minute red card, because those are the rules these days in the Rugby Championship. It's not a rule that I am particularly fond of, but here we are. What can you do? Now, I mentioned they were down to 13 men, and that was because Santiago Carreras, not Mateo, this time Santiago, well, he attempted to intercept a ball that was passed from Lucanio Am to Pieter-Steph du Toit. Pieter-Steph never received the ball because Santiago Carreras attempted to intercept it. The TV officials and Ben O'Keefe had a different opinion on it. They thought that it was deliberate, and unfortunately in rugby, when you attempt an intercept and you don't actually hold onto the ball, it's a yellow card. It's a law that I strongly disagree with. I actually spoke about it in my review video when the Springboks beat the All Blacks in Cape Town, when Willie Leroux received a yellow card for something very similar. I think, I'll repeat it if you didn't actually see that video, I believe that yellow cards should be for foul play, or I accept that there might be a broader definition of cynical play. But in this case, and I know that there was an overlap, and you can't fault Carreras for attempting to stop the move. I mean, you could even argue that it's an act of defense. But to my eye, he did make an attempt to intercept it. Regardless of what the chances were of the actual interception, they may very well have been low. But I just think that to send a man off the field for 10 minutes for doing that, when you factor in that someone like Matera got a yellow card, a minimum yellow card, for what he did to Vincent Koch, and earlier Mateo Carreras was given a yellow card for taking out Apalele Fassi in the air, is taking someone out in the air equivalent to attempting an intercept pass that is knocked on. And when you put it in such simple terms, I just think it's a load of nonsense, and it's a law that I strongly, strongly disagree with, even though in this case, South Africa were the beneficiaries of that yellow card. I mentioned Fassi a second ago. Speaking of him, he started a beautiful move. Not long after that, offloading to Lucanio who went on a beautiful run. That was down the right-hand side. The Springboks recycled a few times before Fassi again received the ball in the back line, and he attempted his own cross kick. This was a very good one, landing more or less in the in-goal area. And Kurtley Arendse, I think he overran it, because he got there, and instead of stretching out to just put pressure on the ball, he attempted to fall on the ball. Maybe the ball just moved a little bit too quickly for him. It can be a little bit deceptive sometimes when you're watching it on TV, but Arendse actually missed the ball overall. Now, the on-field decision initially was try, but then you saw the replays and you could see that actually it was not a try, which was a great shame because that had try of the year written all over it. But not to worry, South Africa would go and get their next try shortly thereafter. But before I tell you about that, I want to just touch on Fassi again, because before all of this happened, Argentina kicked the ball into touch, and Fassi, I thought this was brilliant, leapt into the air, caught it mid-air, and his momentum took him back into the field of play, thereby stopping Argentina from forcing a line out in our 22, but putting the Springboks back on the attack. I really, really enjoyed that moment, and it was great to see from Fassi, who, again, if you watched my preview video for this match, you'll know that I am a fan, and I want to see him doing well, and I really think that he can be the 2IC to Damian Willemse going forward. There are some issues that he might need to sort out. He didn't have a great game last week at the Estadio Único Madre de Ciudades, but on this occasion, I thought Fassi was on fire. Anyway, we did eventually go and get that try that we didn't get when Kurtley went over the line without the ball. On this occasion, it was Pieter-Steph du Toit, his second try of the match, to match what Fassi had done earlier. And I must say that at that stage, what I was really, really enjoying, even though the second half wasn't as enjoyable in my opinion, I was enjoying the width that we were playing with. We were very comfortable. Then we were on the left side. Then we were coming all the way back to the right side. It was lovely to see. Yes, we were still playing phases. We were still operating in our pods. The cross kicks were lovely to see. The innovation, the creativity, it was really, really good. And I have to say that if you are our opponents, you should be very, very scared, because I think that as clinical as the Springboks were in this match, I don't think that we've seen them at their best yet. Yes, they're best in the Rugby Championship this year, in my opinion, but there are areas, many areas, I believe, where we can improve, and that is going to be very, very scary if you are Scotland, England, or Wales, because they are the teams that we play next on our end-of-year tour. But before I say any more, there was time for one more try from the Springboks to wrap it all up. It was Jesse Creel that would crash over, and the final score in Nelspruit was 48-7. I predicted 29-15, so, I wasn't that far out. But let's be honest, it was a magnificent performance from our Springboks. Wonderful to see Siya Kolisi lifting the Rugby Championship trophy at the end. And it means that the Springboks are now the Rugby World Cup holders, the Rugby Championship winners. We also hold the Mandela Plate, the Freedom Cup, and just for good measure, you know what else we have in our trophy cabinet right now? The Qatar Airways Cup. In fact, we've never lost a match in the Qatar Airways Cup. Now, with all of that being said, I think if we had to assess the way the Springboks performed in this match overall, it was a joy to watch. The scrums were beyond dominant. The line-out functioned beautifully. The creativity we saw in the backline was wonderful. Manie Lebok had a superb game. Again, everyone in that team actually had a great game. My man of the match, Pieter-Steph du Toit. I saw that the adjudicators agreed with my assessment. I think they agreed with me last week as well. So I'm starting to feel quite good about my man of the match judgments, unlike my score predictions. If you're Argentina, well, Los Pumas, I think they had a great rugby championship. Again, beating the Springboks, the Wallabies and the All Blacks for the first time in the same year in this competition. They have a lot to feel proud about. Their inconsistency is something that is going to bother them, and that is something that Felipe Contepomi is going to have to work on, as well as I mentioned earlier in this episode, the scrum. That is going to be huge for Argentina if they are going to go to Australia in 2027 as genuine contenders for the Rugby World Cup. I believe that they've got 3 years, so they can do it. They can go to Australia with a genuine shot at winning the Rugby World Cup for the first time. I'm being very optimistic here, but there is a lot of work to be done. But I think that the platform, or at least the foundation, has been set, and Los Pumas are going to go from strength to strength. I'm very confident of that. As are South Africa. As mentioned, Scotland, England and Wales are next on the end of year tour. And what do we have to gain from that? More dominant performances, perhaps. Obviously, the fields will be different, the weather conditions will be different. We'll have to wait and see who Rassie actually takes on that end-of-year tour. Will it be the same squad from the Rugby Championship? Will there be wholesale changes? Will there be a handful of changes? I'm expecting to see Damian Willemse on that end-of-year tour as a matter of interest. Well, that wraps up my assessment of the Springboks and Pumas in Nelspruit. I want to thank you very much for watching this episode. And if you've enjoyed it, as mentioned previously, you can head on over to that super thanks button. If you didn't see it, there's also a button with 3 dots in it. And if you click on that, then you will see the heart with the $sign. And if you're not ready yet to make a little donation, what you can do for me is hit that like button or smash it. You can even crock roll that like button if you like. I will not stand in your way. You can also subscribe to the channel even if you have not yet done so. And before I say goodbye, I want to tell you about a couple of other videos on my channel. Starting with Heineke Meyer. He was the Springbok coach that was born in Nelspruit, and he had a credible time as Bok coach. I did a really good interview with him. You can watch that video over here. And if you want to watch something else, well, over here you can see Frans Steyn. He played in the Springbok team in 2019 that won the Rugby Championship the last time round. It's also the last time we put 40 points past the Pumas. That one took place in Salta, and you can hear all about his wonderful career. Pick a video and go check it out, and I will see you next time.